What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here, and back to review the new film They Will Kill You, starring Zazie Beetz. The film is being advertised as an action comedy horror film, and it is directed by Kirill Sokolov, and it is co-written by Sokolov alongside Alex Litvak. And I won't waste any time getting to the point. I very nearly walked out of this movie several times, but in the back of my mind I was thinking, for very selfish reasons, you haven't posted a video in a week, it's time to review a new movie. And who knows, maybe there'll be somebody out there who might listen to you and you'll save them $20-25. And if that turns out to be the case, well then, mission accomplished. But before I start ripping into this movie with great relish and delight, let me offer one or two positive words just so people don't think I'm a complete and total sociopath. Zazie Beetz was totally game. I feel like in another universe, in a parallel reality, this could have been a really cool kind of grindhouse exploitation flick with a lot of gore and shock value and humor and sex appeal. And it could have just been a wild night at the movies. And you can see it in each and every single scene in the movie that Zazie Beetz has given this movie her all. She's holding nothing back. It's an incredibly physically demanding role. I mean, she spends most of the movie either fighting people or climbing through tunnels or doing all this crazy stuff. And she is just totally game. So high five to Zazie Beetz. I've been a fan of hers ever since I first saw her in Deadpool 2, where she played Domino. And the other positive is the movie's short, mercifully short. It's 94 minutes long, so I was sitting there, my butt was rising up like in the first 2 minutes of the movie as soon as I started hearing the dialogue. But I was like, you know what? It's a short movie. Maybe it'll redeem itself. And the last positive thing I'll say is that the movie's got one pretty good action scene. And a lot of people are going to oversell it and say, oh my God, the movie starts off with this incredible action scene, and too bad that I couldn't sustain it. It's a pretty good action scene. You see most of it in the Red Band trailers. If you've seen the Red Band trailer, you've already spoiled like 50% of what this movie has to offer. But the rest of the movie, well, maybe before I start offering my observations about it, I should just give you the official premise. A woman takes a job as a housekeeper in an NYC high-rise. Unaware of the building's history of disappearances, she soon realizes the community is shrouded in mystery. And I feel like that description's being unnecessarily vague because the trailer gives away most of the premise, where the building is full of these cult-like figures who are offering up all sorts of sacrifices to demonic entities and so on and so forth. And basically, Zazie Beetz has to try to survive the evening. But here is the big problem. 1 week ago, there was a movie that came out that had almost the exact same plot, where you've got two bickering sisters who are constantly talking shit, but eventually have a reconciliation.
Fuck you.
No, fuck you.
No, bitch. Fuck you.
Fuck you!
You've got a wealthy environment. In one case it was a mansion. In this case it's a wealthy New York high-rise, where you've got a bunch of crazy elites who do all sorts of sordid, depraved shit behind closed doors, who are basically looking for a ritualistic sacrifice. And you basically have these two girls on the run the entire evening, killing people in increasingly kind of grotesque and over-the-top ways. But it's like, Ready or Not 2, Here I Come. It literally came out 7 days ago, and apart from the leading actresses and apart from the location, they're almost verbatim the exact same movie. And I wonder if they were even aware of each other as they were in development and in production, if they were trying to race to the screen. But one of them should have blinked and maybe budged off the release date, because I don't think either movie is particularly good, but you could have at least given both movies a little room to breathe. Hell, if you're going to release them 1 week apart, why not just release them on the same weekend and just see what happens and let the best movie win? If I had to pick which one I liked more, I might lean towards They Will Kill You, just because I think the one pretty good scene in They Will Kill You is better than any individual scene in Ready or Not 2. But the rest of They Will Kill You is so terrible, it's definitely going to be in my top 10 Hall of Shame list for 2026. My Hall of Fame list, my top 10 list for the year, is very pitiful right now. It's basically got one movie, Project Hail Mary. But my Hall of Shame list is rapidly filling up. It's like I'm going to have 10 really strong contenders by the time we even get to April or May. But let's start breaking down some of this movie's problems, because the feature attraction in They Will Kill You is the action. Watching Zazie Beetz basically picking up household items like hammers or the claw of the hammer and just ripping into people, ripping them a new one, and just fucking them up left and right, eviscerating them in every way you could possibly imagine. But in any action movie, whether it leans toward the horror genre, or leans towards fantasy, or just a full-blown classic 80s action movie, an action movie requires adversaries that might potentially do you harm or damage. And I don't mind the fact that Zazie Beetz is kicking ass and taking names, and she's basically indestructible. But on the opposing side, you need one or two people who are all right, when they finally cross swords, all hell's gonna break loose and it's gonna be fucking phenomenal. It's just a cast full of dipshits and klutzes and losers and total dumbasses who are completely and totally ineffectual, who can they can barely walk down the hall without tripping over their own feet and letting Zazie Beetz like bury machetes in their head and that sort of thing. So at no point in the movie do you feel any sense of stakes or danger or excitement. And in order to have some satisfaction when bad guys get killed, you can't just say, oh, well, they're crazy rich people who are doing evil things, so you can just delight in that. There needs to be a challenge for the hero or the heroine to overcome, and this movie doesn't feature that at all. But there's a much deeper problem working against this movie, basically a cancerous rot eating away at its soul, where the writers, Alex Litvak and Kirill Sokolov, they don't quite know if they want to do like a message-driven, kind of preachy, kind of sanctimonious movie, or a schlocky, trashy exploitation movie. And I feel like if you're dealing with either lane, you kind of got to pick a lane, because if you try to combine them, they clash tonally, because I've seen a lot of trashy, schlocky movies in my time. Like I'm wearing a Ninja 3 The Domination shirt. I grew up going to see canon films in the theater, whether they were ninja movies or breakdance movies or horror movies or whatever. And those guys made like thousands of really schlocky movies, and some of them were great, and most of them were pretty much forgettable. But I could basically spend all day, every day watching schlocky movies for the rest of my life and consider my time very well spent.
His soul possesses the body of an innocent woman and transforms her into a lethal assassin. Who are you?
But over the last 5 or 10 years, we've also been subjected to a lot of very preachy, kind of message-driven movies. So I'm very familiar with those kinds of movies as well. Like this year I had a movie called The Bride, which was like, the heavyweight champion of that kind of movie. This movie at times tries to be like The Bride, but it's much clumsier and much dumber and like less nuanced and more obvious. Like if you want the dumb version of The Bride, They Will Kill You offers it up here and there. It doesn't it's not pervasive across the story, but it opens that way. So you immediately, like within the first 5 minutes of the movie, you're like, oh, I know exactly where we're going with this flick. It's going to be incredibly predictable because I know who the good guys are and I know who are the people are that like need a talking to. And there's nothing more annoying than a movie that feels like it's kind of putting you in a seat and like, I'm about to give you a stern talking to, a serious lecture that you've earned or you deserve. And it's like, you know what? I just paid $25 for this shitty experience. How about giving me some entertainment before you start ripping into me with all your obnoxious lectures? And so once again, if you're going to make an obnoxious lecture movie, once again, those movies are out there and they do get made and there's an audience for them. You can make money off those. But if you want to make what amounts to, at times, kind of like a Tarantino ripoff. Like there are beats and there are moments and there are music cues and there's structural moments where you feel like, oh, these filmmakers saw Kill Bill Volume 1 and Volume 2 many, many times, and they're trying to kind of like take a page from Tarantino's book from like over 20 years ago, and the irony being that Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2 are already ripoffs of like Italian spaghetti westerns and like Italian horror movies and Japanese revenge Yakuza sagas and that sort of thing. So this is like a ripoff of a ripoff or a copy of a copy. And I feel like these filmmakers, they did not know what movie they were trying to make. And when you have a movie that's basically suffering from a deep identity crisis where it doesn't quite know what movie it wants to be, what you end up with is one of those really annoying movies that thinks it's shocking, thinks it's outrageous, but it's the exact opposite. There's not a single moment or scene in this entire movie where people are going to go, oh my God, like no one's going to recoil in horror. No one's going to clap and applaud from like the outrageousness of it. No one's going to high five their friends at a bar talking about the great scenes. I saw it in a fairly full theater, which shocked the hell out of me. I saw it at 3 p.m. on a Thursday. Granted, it's opening day, but the theater was more or less, I'd say about half full. So obviously they were hoping for the best. I didn't hear a word. I didn't hear a peep. I didn't hear laughter. I didn't hear screams. I didn't hear anything. Total silence. And I saw 1 or 2 walkouts. So I imagine this movie will disappear and vanish like it never existed. Just into the ether. And it's a shame because there are people in this movie where I've really enjoyed their careers. Like, I'm new to Zazie Beetz, relatively new, but Heather Graham's in this movie. I've been watching Heather Graham in movies since Drugstore Cowboy and License to Drive, 1,000 years ago when I was a teenager.
He knew he might be sorry.
This Mercedes has a dead battery.
Okay, do your breathing.
And just so people know, I'm no longer a teenager, sadly. That was a long time ago. And then she was like the queen of the 1990s with movies like Boogie Nights and things like that. Love Heather Graham. And she's still doing cool stuff like Suitable Flesh, that horror movie that came out like 2 years ago. She is wasted on this movie. We have Tom Felton in here, Draco Malfoy himself. If you want to see him in a movie, see him in Fuck 'Em All, the comedy that came out a few months ago. He was hilarious in that. But we also have Patricia Arquette in here. And once upon a time, Patricia Arquette made basically every teenage boy on planet Earth fall in love with her, watching her in Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors. Although I think I was 11 when that came out. Loved her in that. And then she was incredible in like True Romance and Lost Highway. She did some really good stuff when I was growing up. This might be, well, it's easily the worst performance of her career in this movie, but it might be the worst performance of the 21st century, where in every single scene, you can tell she's like looking for an accent that is very elusive. You can even see it in the trailer where she has 3 different accents. Sometimes she's doing this horrendous, like kind of like Irish accent where she's kind of leaning into her R's and like, ugh, don't do any of that. And then sometimes she's just a raging shit kicker redneck, like, "Who are you?" Which you see prominently in the trailer.
Who the fuck are you?
And then other times she's trying to do this kind of fake, New York like aristocrat where she's like the la-di-da about everything. Maybe I would argue that if you love bad movies and you enjoy laughing at movies and pointing, I'm not recommending people do this, but if you enjoy laughing at a movie's expense, Patricia Arquette might be worth watching just for like, well, actually, no, it's not worth paying to see it, but anyway, it's going to go down in the annals of film history as one of the most humiliating kind of, self-destructive performances, basically, of this entire century so far. So in the final analysis, this is one of those movies for complete and total morons. This is a movie for people who sniff airplane glue out of cellophane bags and get it glued around their face and end up suffocating to death. Or people who are like huffing gasoline. And if you don't know what huffing gasoline is, look it up. But people used to actually get buzzes from smelling gasoline. And it literally it's like taking an ice cream scooper and scooping out chunks of your brain. It is that destructive. But if that is your idea of a good time, once again, sniffing airplane glue or huffing gasoline, you will think they will kill you. It's just an absolute delight. But I've got one more observation to make, which I can't make without going into mild spoiler train. So if you don't want any spoilers of any kind, 3, 2, 1, this is your last warning, blah, blah, blah. But this movie has an ingredient toward the end of the movie. Well, it's actually throughout the movie, but it kind of has this major payoff toward the end where all these people in this building, they're devil worshippers, and they're basically trading these sacrificial victims in exchange for immortality, which means throughout the movie, and anytime they get their legs chopped off or their heads blown off or whatever, they grow back slowly. They're unkillable. However, just because they're unkillable doesn't make them threatening. If anything, it makes them more ridiculous because, once again, they're clumsy and ineffectual and not good in fight scenes. So you're watching all these bumbling idiots just falling over themselves to get eviscerated by Zazie Beetz. And then they regenerate and they come back after her, which makes the already low stakes go even lower. It's like, all right, well then you're not even killing the villains. It's like, it's so unsatisfying when you have people that can't fight just getting ripped up. Like, once again, it's like the appeal of this movie wears off very, very quickly. But then it peaks at the very end where the devil comes out of like an altar and imbues this disembodied pig head with his spirit. And this pig head, people like write their names on it, and that's what gives them the immortality. As long as they're making the sacrificial, rituals from like, on a monthly basis or whatever. But in the infinite wisdom of the people behind this movie, they decide the final boss of this movie will be Patricia Arquette, the crazy old lady who's always in search of a different accent in each scene. She takes the pig head off and puts it on and turns into like a CGI pig monster who's like jumping around with their weapons and doing... You know what she reminds me of? She turns into Yoda at the end of Attack of the Clones when he's jumping around and fighting Count Dooku. I don't want to get sidetracked talking about Star Wars, but I think that scene sucks. But it sucks even worse when it's a crazy old lady with weird accents putting on a pig head and suddenly doing like unnecessary flippy shit and spinny shit while in an action scene, like fighting Zazie Beetz with a machete. It just sucks. And in the end, when a movie just fucking sucks, there's not much more you can say about it apart from just avoid it like the plague, save your money. You could basically do anything on planet Earth and your time will be much better spent. So I'm sorry that Zazie Beetz, who clearly signed up wanting to do a badass like revenge saga, but somehow ended up in this total bullshit bukkake shit sandwich of a movie. But that is what They Will Kill You turned out to be. And if people end up watching it and having a good time with it, more power to you. I won't tell you how to spend your time or your money, but the action movie that's on my radar that I am excited about, I've heard nothing but good things about it, is The Furious. The Furious, I think it's coming out at the end of May or the beginning of June, but everybody who's seen it at film festivals over the last year or so is like, oh my Lord, this is something special. So it sounds like the next, like The Night Comes for Us is coming our way in a very short time. So I have a feeling that my craving for action is going to be satisfied in the very near future, but it was not They Will Kill You. But in any case, those are my thoughts on the movie. You can take them or leave them, but I suspect by the time we get to this Sunday and look at the box office numbers for this weekend, I imagine that the opening weekend of They Will Kill You will be worse than even the second weekend of Ready or Not 2. That's my official box office prediction for this upcoming Sunday. And for anybody keeping score, we will find out if I'm right or not on Sunday. But I hope you enjoyed this kind of anger-filled rant. If so, please consider liking, subscribing, hitting that notification bell. You know the drill, but thanks again for watching, and more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.